Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The Mexico City Grand Prix is this weekend and leaks are emerging that Max Verstappen and Red Bull will be bringing two bodyguards to protect Verstappen from serious threats being made potentially even against his life by Mexican fans that are not happy by the way things are going at Red Bull at the moment. Will there be any serious consequences from this weekend? Are these precautions necessary from the Red Bull perspective? How do the organisers intend to deal with some of these potential issues? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's just dive straight in. These are the new helmet designs that Sergio Perez will be running this weekend for his home Grand Prix. There were rumours not long ago that Perez was going to announce his retirement this weekend, but clearly he's been having a hard time against Max this season. After the first couple of races, it's been pretty much all downhill since Miami. He needs to have a good weekend here. He really needs at least a podium. A win would be very special, but Max is probably going to get the victory if last year and the recent races are anything to go by. And the fans don't want to see that. It's become very clear, especially, I think, since Brazil 2022, the controversy there. The Mexican Perez fans are not fans of Max Verstappen and really necessarily the Red Bull outfit as a whole. We knew that full well before the Austin Grand Prix and very clearly after the Austin Grand Prix. Lots of Mexican fans, of course, there in Austin, Texas, chanting Checo during the podium ceremony. If you guys watch Ted's Notebook, you'll see all the Mexican fans there and Checo Perez fans going crazy for their driver. And look, he was getting booed Verstappen heavily on the podium ceremony. Now, there was some talk after the fact, oh, maybe they were just booing this politician. I know that I watched Kim Illman's video on it and he said, nah, that wasn't the case. They were booing Max as soon as he was up there and they did it for the entire time that he was there. And look, you can argue it's poor form. I think it's kind of like a natural consequence of the way things work in sports. One driver wins for a long time, people get fed up of it, and, you know, they let their thoughts be known. It's always how it goes. It's a tale as old as time. Verstappen maybe especially so from the very passionate, for maybe good and for ill, Mexican fans, as we'll see in a second, because, you know, Verstappen hasn't exactly been particularly friendly with Checo in various instances over the last year or so. As I say, Brazil 2022 was the big example of when he failed to yield the position that he was promised, and I think ever since then, it's not just been a case of, oh, Verstappen's better than Perez. I think some of the fans perceive it as Verstappen is, intentionally sabotaging his own teammates, which may or may not be the case, and he's obviously got more pace anyway. But the reality is that he gets booed a lot, especially at circuits like this, and that's the US Grand Prix. That's not even setting foot yet in Mexico. Now, of course, if Verstappen wanted, he could just miss this Grand Prix weekend and decide, you know what, it's not worth it. I'll just come back next time, I'll go to Brazil or whatever, the next Grand Prix after that. The reality is he is going to be there in attendance, and Red Bull want to ensure that they are safe. I think what also, it's not bad for Verstappen to do this, but, he relishes, in a way, the boos, right? The criticism that he gets, the booing that he gets from fans, he seems to thrive on that, right? And, he says, look, if it's 10 times worse next week and I win it, I'll still go with a trophy. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't seem like it affects him. And, there's an argument that the more you boo Verstappen, the more he grows stronger. And he might be hearing these, Checo fans, booing him and cheering Checo in the Austin Grand Prix. I think, all right, I'll really try my best to put them in their place next weekend. Now, Helmut Marko hasn't helped this either, the Red Bull outfit, because, look, he made those comments recently about Perez and saying that, oh, well, because he's South American, although Mexico's not even in South America, you guys know the drill. And he basically said Checo isn't quite as focused because he's not German like Vettel was or Dutch like Verstappen is. He then had to walk that back and apologise. And not great, lots of controversy. And you'd have thought Marko would have just shut up about all this stuff. But no, because after the US Grand Prix, he then said actually, the Mexican fans are rather unsporting for booing Verstappen in this scenario, despite the fact that it wasn't long ago, we're talking 2021, when Marko was pretty much celebrating the boos that Hamilton used to get when he was the one who kind of dominated the sport for some time. People wanted Verstappen to win. And, as he said at the time, games resulted in a beautiful concert of whistles. But, of course, he has a rather different opinion when it's against his own driver. Now, this is not the first time that we have seen extra security for drivers in Mexico It happened back in 2017 with Ocon, where he had some death threats come through, and they brought extra security to Mexico to ensure that there were not serious issues here, and obviously, thankfully, everything was okay. But an article came out here from F1 Insider saying that Red Bull are going to do the same thing for Max Verstappen, stepping up their security measures. This is what the article says. The first bit is very interesting. Verstappen is going to be accompanied by 2 bodyguards there. This was confirmed by Marco, who said that Max doesn't really want that and is relaxed, but we have the responsibility for him. That's why we just want to play it safe. And apparently Marco didn't mention, maybe for good reason, that even before the booing and the whistles in Austin, there had been some threats against Verstappen on social media. This is another reason why Red Bull chose the bodyguard in Mexico. Now, this is the thing, you get these threats on social media, people will reply to the tweets and say all sorts of different things about, what's going to happen if Max comes to Mexico and what they're going to do. Vast majority of the time, no one follows through on that, it's just Twitter fingers talking. But you've got to be concerned, when serious threats come in. I'm sure that Verstappen's replies on Instagram maybe don't look so pretty. And I'm sure that amid some of the other threats, there probably are some threats against Verstappen's life mixed in there somewhere. So, yeah, good reason for Verstappen and Red Bull to be cautious, especially because the Mexico Grand Prix, the paddock is quite open. Getting to the drivers is, okay, I guess Red Bull will play it safe, but it's not impossible, I think, the way the paddock is designed. So, yeah, definitely worthy of being on the safer side. And let's be honest, Helmut Marko here, I don't know if he's going to set foot in Mexico City. I don't know if that would be the wisest thing to do. If he values his life, he will probably just sit this one out. But we shall see what he decides to do this weekend. The thing that kind of made this next level, though, is exactly why are the Mexican, Checo fans going this hard against Max. And we've talked about some of the reasons. If this is a reason, which is talked about in the article, it's really quite something. But apparently, the father of Verstappen's teammate Perez, of course, Papa Perez or whatever people call him. I know he's a controversial character in Mexico because of politics and stuff. But people like his beaming smile, so he gets kind of good PR. But apparently, he has repeatedly mentioned in interviews with Mexican media that the Dutchman is considered an enemy among his emotional compatriots. They blame the Dutchman for the form crisis of their own idol. So, okay, some interesting translations here, but the point is quite clear. Okay, maybe the translation for enemy isn't perfect, but it kind of gets the point across, right? That, Papa Perez is kind of saying, Verstappen is the enemy, which is, it's an interesting scenario when you've got 2 teammates for the same team, and, you'd thought potentially a common goal of winning the championship together. That is not how, especially nowadays. Maybe last year it was slightly different, but I think since Brazil and since some of these comments that are apparently being made in the Mexican media, the perception of Max is rather different, that he is not just, faster than Perez necessarily, but he's actively trying to sabotage and, actively resulting in the form crisis that he has. And you can talk about whether, the car being developed in a certain direction has helped Max over Perez. That's certainly a talking point that his fans will be making. So, yes, Max will have bodyguards for the Mexican Grand Prix. What do you guys think about this? Hopefully nothing happens, but you got to wonder, the way the podium setup is right there in Mexico and all the crowd around and everything, understandably Red Bull are going to have to be a little bit concerned. And I think it does begin really from last year's Brazilian Grand Prix, where Max did not yield that position to Checo, despite the Perez let him through to try and chase. Max couldn't make any overtakes happen, and, typically when that occurs, you then yield the position back to your teammate. He didn't do so. Verstappen said that I gave my reasons, I was never going to do that, and George Russell's famous victory was somewhat overshadowed by all of the drama at Red Bull, and there was all this getting dug up about, Monaco 2022, did Perez deliberately crash, all this stuff. And since then, Perez fans have not been the biggest fans of Max, to such an extent that we now get developments such as this. So I'm sure Max will want to absolutely destroy Perez this weekend, probably. I mean, this is just how Max operates. He wants to be ruthless, and he will want to show that, indeed he is the man to beat here in Mexico in front of the home crowd, because that's just what Max wants to do, and, that's what a competitor would do. But Checo himself will try and do well. I mean, he really would, the podium, of course, again, would be very well received, of course. But, Perez is P3 and Max is P1. Then you could probably guess how that celebration is going to end up. And of course, we've got Sky Sports talking about, okay, where's Perez going to finish? And people are quote tweeting this, stuff like this. So yeah, hopefully it's a good weekend for Perez, but it does depend on how quick the car is relative to the opposition. Circuits like Monza, the Red Bull was so much faster than everybody else in race trim that even though Perez had a bit of a shocker really and was struggling to make overtakes, he still quite comfortably finished P2 in the end behind, of course, Verstappen. However, if the pace differential is more similar, it becomes more challenging for Perez to actually get close, because let's not forget, if there is, let's say there's 3/10 between Verstappen and Perez, and the field is quite tight, Perez doesn't end up P2, Perez ends up, P6, P5, P8, maybe even worse. And that does depend on the relative race pace of the teams this weekend. This is, according to Albert Fabregas simulator, the predicted race pace. Now, look, I don't really know if I buy this. To be fair, last week I was looking at this and it said Aston Martin were going to be like the worst team. And I was like, no way. And then, guess what happened in qualifying? They both went out in Q1. So maybe there's something to it, but I really doubt that the gaps are this close, to be honest. So, yeah, predicted race pace, right? And this is not quali trim, this is race pace. And let's not forget the Red Bull in race trim, usually because of their incredible tyre wear on the way the car is designed, is much faster than this, but we'll see. So the simulator says the Red Bull are going to be a 10th faster than Mercedes with their new upgrades. They're going to be 2/10 faster than McLaren, 2/10 faster than Ferrari, then Alpine, the 5th fastest car, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Aston, all the way down here, although that I'm not so convinced by this just because we saw that even Stroll had great pace with the upgrades. But it might take some understanding. I know that Steiner has said this about Haas as well, that they brought the upgrades to the car, and they're not a miracle, they're not a silver bullet, they haven't solved all their problems, but they've got more understanding and kind of performance to extract, because when you've got a couple of sessions, one session, okay, they changed things after Parc Fermé into the race, but they wanted to change their setup, and it's difficult to understand everything on just a single practice session, so I'm expecting Aston to be more competitive than this. But if this is true for the top 4 teams, that they're all very closely matched, which would be exciting, and to be honest, it should be the case at some point this season, and we're getting into the final few races, that because the Red Bull has brought no changes in a long time, and the other teams, especially Mercedes, have brought further upgrades, as have McLaren, we should be at a more competitive point of the season. The issue is that if Mercedes and McLaren and Ferrari are within 2/10, then if Perez is 3/10 off Max, then all of a sudden he's, way out of the, down in the points. So I think that's the concern, but I think that it's quite likely that Red Bull will be significantly faster than this, given what we saw last weekend. There were even rumours that Red Bull gave up about 1/10 of a second a lap on the ride height to ensure that they didn't suffer with what Mercedes and Hamilton and Leclerc eventually got disqualified for. So, there was a 1/10 of a second a lap probably in performance from the Red Bull that wasn't seen, and therefore over a 60-lap race, that's 6 or so seconds that he would have been further in front with the brake issues. And you got to think that in the race on the Saturday, he was 10 seconds ahead. He was half a second a lap faster than Hamilton was over the course of the sprint. And there's another 10th in that, at least probably, on the ride height levels they went for. So just goes to show that the Red Bull does have serious pace, and Perez should be good for at least a podium. And who knows, right? I mean, Verstappen there's been mechanical issues in terms of Saudi Arabia qualifying, the gearbox problems that sometimes occur, the brake problems that sometimes occur. But apart from that, the car has been very reliable and hasn't broken down. Maybe if there's a weekend for, some Mexican Checo fan to try and unrelease a screw or something on Verstappen's engine, then maybe this is the weekends where they could make that happen. Quickly on Mercedes, James Allison was commenting on the Grand Prix and says that if they can keep the car cool, apparently this weekend is going to be slightly cooler than last year. It's always an issue with cooling in Mexico with the temperatures and also the altitude. You get less air that can come in and cool the car, stuff like this. And of course, the turbocharger tends to struggle with the lack of air at those altitudes. The Ferrari one, especially, as we have seen in recent years, especially last year. But Allison says they should be good. The corners ought to suit us. The pace of the car should be decent. All things considered, all things that we've plonked on the car should pay dividends. So we'll see if that works out well for Mercedes this weekend. But that's just about going to do it for today. Just wanted to mention before we close out the video here, I did show this briefly yesterday, but I didn't even discuss it, so I thought I might as well. A different pole sitter there has been in every year for the last 11 Grand Prix. So the Mexican Grand Prix was off the calendar from 93 until 2015, but it was Senna, Berger, Patrese, Mansell in those 4 years, and then in recent times it's been Rosberg, Hamilton, Vettel, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Bottas, Verstappen. So it does Okay, this might not mean anything, but it's kind of interesting, right? That this year you're looking at a Perez is one candidate that isn't on here. You're potentially looking at a, George Russell, maybe even a Fernando Alonso, a Carlos Sainz, maybe a Lando Norris, maybe an Oscar Piastri. One of those guys, if they're in the position to potentially get pole, would continue the streak. Now, you'd put your money on Verstappen just secure a pole position back-to-back years, but intrigued your thoughts on all that in the comment section below. So thanks for watching as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.